How could this be?
Guys?
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This will be my full X-Men 97 Season 2, Episode 7 video. There's a whole bunch of Easter eggs, references to the comics, so we will break it all down. Between all the Comic-Con, Avengers Doomsday stuff, Gambit coming back on X-Men 97, and all the Spider-Man Brand New Day X-Men stuff happening later this week, X-Men fans are eating really, really good right now. The episode is titled Strange Land, Savage Heart, which is a reference to both the Savage Land itself and the original episodes of X-Men the Animated Series, Savage Land, Savage Heart, which was originally a two-part episode where Sauron kidnaps Storm to the Savage Land in order to feed from her mutant energy. Wolverine, Beast, Rogue, and Jubilee go after him back to the Savage Land, and Garrock fuses with the island's volcano in the surging planetary force below it. There were a couple references to this when they go back in the episode. Mostly Beast explaining things to Polaris, like explaining what the Savage Land is, but also as an audience surrogate, like she's the audience surrogate for people that didn't watch the original animated series or didn't read the original X-Men comics and don't know what the Savage Land is. Those original episodes were also the first appearance of the High Evolutionary on the X-Men the Animated Series show, who was also used during Guardians of the Galaxy 3 in the MCU already, but in the episode, he was meant to be more comic book accurate and behind the humanoid animal hybrids, along with Mr. Sinister experimenting on people too, who also creates the hybrids during Guardians 3. Also, no coincidence, Mr. Sinister, big Savage Land person, they reference him a couple times in this episode, also supposed to show up in the new live-action MCU X-Men movie in 2028, or at least one of the sequels at some point. Reportedly, they're going to be using live-action Mr. Sinister finally. But that also means we probably won't see him till at least 2028. There have been a couple attempts at live-action Mr. Sinister, like John Hamm was going to play a version during the New Mutants movie during the Fox era of the X-Men. They also reference Illyana during this episode too, because she is Colossus' sister, Magic, and her likeness in the episode looks just like Anya Taylor-Joy. Like they made her look even more like Anya Taylor-Joy than the original designs for the character. Maybe if we're lucky, Anya Taylor-Joy will come back as Magic in the new X-Men movies during Marvel Phase 7. There's always the chance of that. She's a really big actress, so Kevin Feige has probably been asking her to come back at some point. This time they let Rogue do the previously on X-Men because she used to be one of Magneto's acolytes when his base was in the Savage Land back when they had their romantic relationship. They did a lot of that backstory during X-Men 97 Season 1, and this was before she met Gambit. They also probably let her do this intro also to set up the Gambit reveal at the end of the episode that he seemingly killed Apocalypse after he became his Horseman of Death and got his huge power upgrade. The big twist ending. I know there's going to be a lot of questions about that, so we will address that during the video when we get to that part of the episode. During the previously on, they also remind you that Mystique was both Rogue and Nightcrawler's mother to set up the relationship with Creed as well, because he is also biologically related to Nightcrawler as a half-brother. They had different fathers. Nightcrawler's father was Azazel, and Creed's father was Sabretooth, but they both share the mother, Mystique. There are a lot of references to Mystique and Sabretooth being just terrible, terrible parents. Yes, they are awful, awful parents. There's a lot of Mystique slander during the episode too from all of her children, like many children, like Rogue talking about her, Nightcrawler talking about her, Creed talking about her. And a lot of people have wondered why we haven't seen Mystique during X-Men 97 yet, because she was such a big character during the original animated series. And I still like the theory that she's been masquerading as Valerie Cooper this whole time, and we've just been watching Mystique and just haven't realized it yet. Like she's just secretly using her position as Valerie Cooper inside the government to stay close to the president and pull strings from behind the scenes. So you can let me know what you think is going on with Mystique during the present day of X-Men 97. Like, have we been watching Mystique this whole time, or is she going to be doing something else when she eventually shows up for real, like she reveals herself?
Surprise, mother.
It just feels like it'd be a way cooler twist to have Valerie Cooper be Mystique, because they've been harping so hard on the Valerie Cooper character in Season 1 and Season 2. During the intro this time, they add a number of scenes from the original animated series, but redrawn with modern animation, just making it look way shinier in HD. So they have Polaris, she gets part of the intro because she's back on the team now. There are scenes from Season 1 of Executioner at Magneto's trial, opening fire on all of them. Then the scene of Mystique abandoning Nightcrawler as a baby is from the original X-Men the Animated Series episodes, and they're just polished it, like I said, for modern animation. We get another scene from Season 1 of the show with Valerie Cooper after Bastion turned against her. This scene of Apocalypse transforming in front of Graydon Creed is also from the original animated episodes. He was manipulating events to bring about his Days of Future Past timeline. And then they start the episode with a flashback to the Sentinel massacre on Genosha in Season 1, and we see it from Colossus and his sister Magic's perspective as they use their powers to try and save people. And she tries to soak a full blast from the Sentinel, seemingly dying, trying to save everyone else, but seems happy to do so, like she's happy to sacrifice herself. Colossus then mourning her, and we learn later in the episode that it drove him to extremes to join Magneto's acolytes in the Savage Land, serving Exodus. We then jump back to present day at a rally for the Friends of Humanity, the anti-mutant organization run by Graydon Creed. I fully expect to see a version of him in the live-action MCU Marvel Phase 7 movies once they introduce that rebooted X-Men team, just like a lot of big anti-mutant characters that we'll probably see pop up. And in present day now, he's running for president on an anti-mutant platform. His rhetoric is treating Genosha like it was some kind of destiny consequence that the mutants brought on themselves, and it was somehow the fault of the innocent mutants for everything that happened, not Bastian himself, who was actually responsible for killing all those people. He then tries to call out President Kelly as being too lenient, too friendly to mutants, and spending government money on mutants, X-Factor, a team of mutants. Then getting attacked by Magneto's Acolytes team, who were also featured during the original animated series, but they were just called the Acolytes, not the Acolytes of Magneto. Most of the characters here just return from those older episodes of the team, like Burner here. Most of these people you saw on that team in the past. Random is also a super deep cut, but the big reveal being that Colossus is on the team in present day, and they're being led by Exodus. Exodus is a super powerful, very old Omega-level mutant from 12th century France. There are a couple references that Nightcrawler makes to that later in the episode, joking at him, calling him a Templar, because Exodus helped create the Order of the Knights Templar back during the 12th century, which was also created in the 12th century in real life. So part of the idea is that they've both been men of faith, it's just that Exodus is ancient compared to Nightcrawler. We also saw Exodus on Genosha during Season 1, and it just seems like he's used the tragedy to seize power because he's one of the most powerful mutants on the planet. Now their main base being in the Savage Land, using Mr. Sinister and Magneto's old bases and technology that was just left there after the original animated series. Yoinking Creed and creating the reason why the X-Men have to go back to the Savage Land again to rescue him. So they then call their new team Acolytes of Magneto. Magneto was right. Kid Omega Quentin Quire was also wearing a Magneto was right t-shirt in last week's episode too. So they want to set up the idea that there's like a growing population of mutants that really start to hate humans. And now the world is becoming more divided and heading towards World War III faster and faster, which is kind of what Apocalypse wants. He wants it to be a free-for-all battle royale and only the strongest will survive, whether human or mutant. So remember, this is Apocalypse's grand goal. He wants things to get worse and worse and worse. This is why he's pushing the world towards this big war. So as bad as Creed and the more extremist mutants are, Apocalypse is really just playing four-dimensional chess with all of them.
A mutant! I am as far beyond mutants as they are beyond you.
When they mentioned Magneto was the master of magnetism, that was one of his comic book nicknames. We see Jean Grey and Cyclops getting the news on a TV at a bar while trying to chill out, but there is no rest for the X-Men. No, you don't get to have fun. There's totally going to be a world-ending threat every single week that you got to deal with. To be fair, though, they don't have to go to the Savage Land, so maybe they just left them to watch over the school while everybody else goes to the Savage Land. Like, we'll give you a break this week. You come back next week. Exodus then broadcasts the capture to the world, calling out anti-mutants and demanding X-Factor release all the mutants that they've just captured the last couple of episodes in the next 24 hours, or they will kill Creed, and also call X-Factor raised traitors. So they're really trying to draw battle lines and drive mutants to more extreme measures. Basically taking everything that Magneto was doing with the Brotherhood of Mutants in Asteroid M in the original animated series and going way further, taking the idea way further. We see Pyro, Spiral is in their prison. I can't tell who this Shadow is behind her too, but there's like a bunch of cells with a bunch of mutants that they have captured. President Kelly and Valerie Cooper watch at the White House, and Nightcrawler feels extra on edge because they remind you that he is related to Creed as a half-brother through his mother, Mystique. Rogue also being both of their sisters because Mystique was her adoptive mother, but not biological sister. Valerie Cooper gets pissed at Professor X for getting the X-Men involved, but it's more of an enemy of my enemy is my friend situation between the two of them this week. Like, okay, fine if you're going to do this, but we still hate your guts. They then return to the Savage Land for the first time since the original animated series, this time with Polaris and Bishop on the team, who also have new suits from the Grant Morrison run. Beast does his best science bro explainer for the Savage Land for people who didn't watch the original animated series, and for Polaris because this is her first time in the Savage Land, but it's basically a nature preserve for prehistoric Earth complete with dinosaurs and was created in the comics at least by an alien named Nuwali, then was later used for experiments by the High Evolutionary and Mr. Sinister, mostly Mr. Sinister though during the original animated series. They featured it a number of times over the original animated series. There's a lot more lore in the Savage Land in the comics that the original animated series never got into, though, like the Eternals live there as well. There's a sect of Eternals. They might do live-action version of the Savage Land in Marvel Phase 7 movies and beyond now that they're doing so many X-Men stories, so don't be surprised if at some point we see Savage Land in live action, but it's probably going to be a good long while. When they mentioned the ancient evil spirits and the leftover experiments, those are references to those original two-part episodes from the original animated series. Rogue reminding how Mr. Sinister was also using it as a base during those episodes too. Like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that he used to do that's just roaming around wild, just watch out. Polaris also references the Doomsday Clock. It makes you think of Avengers Doomsday because Marvel has been running one of the longest running live streams on YouTube's platform with the Doomsday Clock counting down to the release of Avengers Doomsday in theaters, but in real life, the Doomsday Clock is an actual thing counting down to mutually assured nuclear destruction. But in the context of the live-action Marvel movies, it's counting down to the doomsday of the Marvel multiverse, like the multiverse will collapse into Avengers Secret Wars. Nightcrawler sets up the idea that he firmly believes that Creed can potentially turn good into a good person if given the chance, which he kind of does not at the end of the episode, and they kind of leave on a bummer for that storyline with Colossus at the end saying, oh, I ultimately ruled against you, you would have lost that trial, and you would have had to join the Acolytes had Exodus not gone rogue at the end of the episode. So it's a bit of a bummer for Nightcrawler in this episode. He was proven wrong about Creed. Like, maybe there's the sliver of hope that he could be a good person because they do give you that big therapy session in the episode. Like, Creed gets the world's biggest mutant therapy session. Turns out all of his war crimes are just the results of having two very bad parents and a lot of childhood trauma. But isn't that the truth for a lot of real-world despots and psychopaths? Turns out all they needed was just a lot of hugs.
Why? Can I have a hug?
They then run into Mr. Sinister's former defenses that the Acolytes have reactivated, taking the plane down in a null field, blocking all their powers. This isn't the first time their jets have been blown up in mid-air, though, so the scene does remind you of that Season 1 scene where the Blackbird blew up mid-air and they had to save each other as they were falling through the sky, but that time they had powers, this time they do not have powers, so they try to do a cool spin on that Season 1 scene. They also use this episode to tease a bit of a relationship between Polaris and Bishop. There's a bit of a vibe between the two of them in the episode and a lot of sexual innuendos. Bishop then learns that he's absorbed too much power, but the inhibitor tower is blocking him from releasing it, so he has to find a way to blow his load, metaphorically, or his power blue balls will literally kill him. So make more sex jokes, make all the sex jokes. That's kind of what's going on with him, like he just has to find a way to release, quote-unquote, his energy, his pent-up energy. Then they want to show that even though Colossus has joined the Acolytes, he's still a relatively sensible person that can be reasoned with, so he still friend to the X-Men and helps them out of the jet, but does not want to give them Creed. Rogue also notes this is the first time she's felt common pains like a normal person's pain, which she kind of enjoys being regular again, but for the constant threat of Exodus in this episode. Like, if it weren't for the big threat of the episode, she'd actually probably be enjoying herself a lot more. That was always one of the biggest issues with her relationship with Gambit, is that she was always constantly afraid of hurting him because of her powers. In the background, you see they've taken up shop at Mr. Sinister and Magneto's old base, and Nightcrawler explains his relationship to Colossus with Creed, taking a play on his sense of family and magic laws, because Colossus has a strong sense of family. We also see the Acolytes are wearing special devices that allow them to use their powers, which is also what Mr. Sinister was doing during those original animated series episodes. You notice they have a Magneto statue in the background, and he's wearing his costume from that trial in the Season 1 episode of the show, and they establish the idea that Exodus is kind of taking advantage of all the mutants there, not helping them, but most of them do seem like they really hate humans. We also see in the library there are pictures of Magneto and all the other dead mutants in this altar that they've created, including Gambit, Magic, as well as Madeline Pryor, pretty much all like the big characters that died on Genosha. They also reveal that Colossus himself painted Magic's picture, and it's a really good painting, so he is like a really good artist. But like I said, it also seems like they're using Anya Taylor-Joy's likeness for Magic in the episode. They then visit Creed down in the cells of the same place where the X-Men were held captive by Mr. Sinister during the original animated series. They speak Bible verses to each other about God because they were both raised as very devout people. And Nightcrawler challenges Exodus, another religious person, to hold Creed on trial for his crimes against mutants, thinking that he can prove that he's a good man. He calls Exodus a Templar, like I said, which is a reference to Exodus creating or helping create the Order of Knights Templar back during the actual 12th century, which is when they were created in real life. Saying that he, Nightcrawler, will join the Acolytes if he loses the trial with Colossus being the judge, and also revealing at the end of the episode, like I said, that he would have lost the trial, Colossus would have voted against Creed, and he would have ultimately been forced to join them had Exodus not gone off the rails. So Exodus kinda did him a solid in trying to kill Creed. And there is a lot of deep-cut mutants in here, like Seamus, Mellencamp, Tempo. All these different characters are all acolytes that showed up during Season 1, and a couple of other characters from other factions of mutants on the original animated series that have since joined them post-Genosha. In the very thick irony here of this scene, Creed being forced to face what he thinks is a kangaroo court biased against him when he himself has done the exact same thing to mutants for a long time, holding them on trial, being very biased against them. Exodus, also being a very devout man his whole life, makes a ton of Bible verse references, original sin, serpent in the garden. Then Nightcrawler tries to give Creed the world's best therapy session over the course of like a minute.
And when I couldn't live up to his name,
he would punish you?
He points out how he was born the child of two mutants, but without powers, just a normal person, and viewed as a disgrace by his father, Sabretooth, who abused him constantly when he was a kid, and all this past trauma with his mother, Mystique, also abandoning him like she abandoned Nightcrawler, causing him to turn out as this psychopath in present day. So really it's all about childhood trauma. And for at least a hot second, they make it seem like Nightcrawler might actually prove that Creed might turn into a good person if given the chance, like he just hates his very, very bad parents, not all mutants, but ultimately Creed succumbs to his worst impulses and proves that he's just been twisted evil over time against mutants. So eventually he does try to kill Exodus. Colossus, though, said that he was about to rule against Nightcrawler, so it was going to be a bad outcome to the trial before Exodus calls an audible and tries to kill Creed anyway. We get a cool assist, though, from Bishop and Polaris riding the Pterodons to destroy the Inhibitor Tower, and they have their big battle royale with their powers again, so they can have like a really, really cool ending fight in the episode. Forge gets to blow his load, finally, probably really happy about that, not going to implode from all the buildup of energy. Colossus joins the X-Men to try and save Creed. Nightcrawler tries to save him, then having a really cool sword fight with both he and Exodus using their teleporting powers. Their teleporting works a little bit differently in the comics, but it amounts to the same idea that they can teleport at will. Here's the thing though, Creed tries to kill Exodus eventually and shoots him through the heart with the energy weapon, but you remember, Exodus is a very, very powerful Omega level mutant, so he is very, very hard to kill, and they kind of want you to wonder whether or not he really is dead at the end of the episode, or if he will recover eventually. Nightcrawler then tries to save Creed again from Polaris' sword, teleporting him to the Arctic, which is meant to also be a callback to him fighting with Sabretooth during the original animated series. Basically, family versus family, like trying to make it as emotional as possible. But of course Nightcrawler is going to spare him, that's just who he is, because he views God as the only true judge, jury, and executioner. So like, he's leaving Creed's fate to God, like whatever God decides will happen to you, whether you live or die. He then leaves him in the snow for X-Factor to eventually find and bring back to America, so Creed is still alive at the end of the episode. Colossus then returns with the X-Men to the X-Mansion, so he's back on the team for the last couple of episodes, also revealing that Nightcrawler lost the trial and would have had to join the Acolytes if Exodus had not gone rogue, so it was a bit of a bummer ending for Nightcrawler. But then we get a real cool tag scene at the end of the episode. It's not a post-credit scene, but it's almost a post-credit scene. X-Force tracks down Apocalypse's base in Greece and sees that he's seemingly been killed by his Horseman of Death Gambit after he gave him his big power upgrade. So they really want you to think that Gambit did kill Apocalypse after he got his powers, but Apocalypse could also be playing tricks by just jumping bodies or making himself look like he's dead, because there's also a lot of time travel shenanigans at play too. So there's a number of ways to explain how Apocalypse still survives this. But I think the real reason for this scene at the end is to set up Gambit as the big threat heading into the last 2 episodes. There's only 2 episodes of Season 2 left, so I think the idea is that the X-Men will face Gambit, Horseman of Death, with his powers, and the real conflict will be all about the X-Men trying to save Gambit's soul and turn him back to the side of good. So even though they're adapting some of the arc from the comics where Gambit does become the Horseman of Death, they're changing a lot from that, so it's not exactly like the comic book version. But I wouldn't be surprised if we get to that final episode at the very end and the X-Men are able to eventually redeem Gambit, like he starts to turn good again and remember because of his love for Rogue. also kind of making it seem like he still has a little bit of free will left in him, where a lot of other Horsemen did not, and that's why he was able to try and kill Apocalypse. Normally, Apocalypse would have total control over his Horsemen and would have way more powers than them to boot, so it'd be really hard for them to kill him unless something really crazy was going on, and it just sounds like that was what was happening with Gambit. Something was different about him becoming the Horseman of Death. And I wouldn't be surprised if at the end of the finale, after they do try to turn Gambit good again, there's some other big reveal that pushes them into season 3, and they reveal that Apocalypse is still alive out there. Like, this is not the way that Apocalypse goes out permadead on the show. They're not going to kill him off screen.
Surprise, mother.
If they're eventually going to permanently stop the threat of Apocalypse, it's going to be in fulfillment of the prophecy about Cable, and Cable is the person that's meant to do that. So if Cable is not involved in killing Apocalypse, that means that he is not truly dead. Everybody post all your reactions in the comments below, and let me know if you spotted any Easter eggs or references in the episode that I didn't talk about in the video. My full episode 8 video will post next week after they release it. Be sure to enable alerts for my channel so you don't miss that. The big reminder is that Spider-Man Brand New Day is hitting theaters tomorrow, so I'll be doing all the videos for the post-credit scene, breakdowns, Easter eggs of the entire movie. Everybody be sure to go see the movie as soon as possible because there is a lot to talk about. Everybody click here and here for all those videos. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.